Hi folks, Spy3141 here again with another video. This video is going to be an update to my HammocK-tarp shelter video. I've been doing a lot of research on hammock camping and also a lot of testing out different materials and different setups, and I found that there's a much nicer, much simpler way to set up your HammocK-tarp shelter. And with that said, I've been watching a lot of YouTube videos, specifically this guy named Shug, who does a lot of hammock videos, and he's got a lot of great info. So if you want more in-depth stuff on hammocking specifically, check out his channel. You can just YouTube Shug and you'll find him. The setup that I've been using the last 3 or 4 times I've been out is mostly paracord, so it's a lot of lighter material, smaller material, but still strong enough to hold my gear and myself up in the hammocks. So what you're going to need for this HammocK-tarp shelter setup is really just a few things. You're going to need some strong paracord or small rope for your tarp and hammock lines. This stuff I got at REI. It's a 3 or 4 mil rope, I can't remember, but it's got a 700-pound breaking strength. You're also going to need some webbing. Doesn't really matter what kind. These are some webbing loops I made. They've got 2 water knots, or a water knot on each end with a loop, so that I can wrap around the tree and then put a carabiner through that, and that's what my line will attach to. This is just some other webbing. These are smaller loops of webbing. Then you're going to need some carabiners. These are climbing carabiners. You don't need climbing carabiners necessarily. And then here we have my hammock. This is an Eno hammock. It's much bigger than my Grand Trunk hammock, and it's very light. This probably weighs less than a pound, but very nice hammock. Breathes really well too. And then this is just a bag with some odds and ends. I've got tent stakes. I've got some prusik loops in here that I'll show you the function of. And then lastly, I bought some of these little tiny S-beaners from REI. They were like $3 or something. They only have a 10-pound strength rating, but they work plenty fine for hanging my gear and other stuff like that, so handy to have. So there you have the essentials for your HammocK-tarp shelter. Obviously the tarp is underneath all this stuff, but not a whole lot of gear, as you can see. So folks, now that I've shown you the materials you're going to need for the HammocK-tarp shelter, I'm going to show you a good example of a place where you can build this shelter. What you see around me right now is oak woodland. In a lot of these areas there are many mature trees and fairly open understory. What that offers for this shelter, or just hammocking or camping in general, is that nothing's in your way. There's no brush you have to clear. Things are just kind of nicely set up for this type of shelter. So this is the area where I'm going to be building my shelter. This tree right here is going to be one anchor, and that tree over there is going to be another anchor point. What I'm going to do first in setting up this shelter is get my anchor points onto the 2 trees I'm going to be using. Alright folks, so what I've noticed after putting this around my first anchor point tree is that this is too long, so I'm going to shorten up one of these loops just to give myself a little bit tighter connection there. I'll show you how to do this. That's where the old knot was. I'm going to make the new one about right there. So to make the water knot, you just make a simple overhand knot, and then all you got to do is put the tag end back through the knot the same way it was tied. So I go through there, around the back, just following the webbing, and then back through the end, just like that. Now that I've retied my water knot, I'm going to put my webbing around my tree, and what that gives me is a slip knot. Here's my second anchor tree. There's my first one over there next to the tripod. This piece of webbing is definitely too long for that little branch, so I'm gonna wrap it around twice and see if it comes out at a good spot for me. Not quite, but we can probably work with that. Yeah, I think so. So this one, just for a little different example, I'm not going to do the slip knot. I'm just going to wrap it around like that, put the carabiner there. Okay folks, so I went ahead and set up both anchor points for the hammock and the tarp. This is the tarp, this is the hammock. These ones are both slip knots with different types of webbing. One thing I should point out when you do slip knots is that the way this is pulling is going to pull this way and tighten itself. If I were to do it this way, it's not really going to tighten itself. Even if it's back here, it's loose. So what you got to do is put the front side through the back side, if that makes sense, and then pull it away from the opening. So now I'm going to be putting the line on for the tarp. I'm going to go ahead and run the line out for my tarp. So what I'm going to do now is tie a trucker's hitch, which allows me to cinch this line up really tight so that once I put everything on it, it's not going to sag a lot. To do the trucker's hitch, I'm just going to pull this relatively tight, and then I'm going to need to make a little loop somewhere in this line. So I like to make it maybe 2 feet from the carabiner so that when I pull it, it's going to pull the knot and all the junk that way, and I'll have a nice clean line to work with. So pull it relatively tight, figure out where I want that loop to be, then I'm going to make a basic loop like this, take the tag end, pull a bite through, and cinch it down just like that. And what I have now is a quick release knot. So once again, make a loop, pull the tag end through with a bite, and cinch it down. Doesn't really matter how big this is, just got to be able to put the line back through it. So now I'll take my tag end, bring it back out, pull it all through that loop, and then I'm going to start cinching down really tight. And this is definitely more critical with the hammock because you're going to have weight in it, but I like doing it on this too, just so everything's nice and secure. It also helps keep the tarp from flapping around in the wind. So what I just did there, so I went through the loop, then I went back through the carabiner. Now I'm going to bring it back out. I'm going to pinch it right here, pinch the knot and the tag end so it doesn't slip on me, and then I'm just going to go around a few times just to get some friction on there. Okay, so I went around a few times. Now I'm going to make a half hitch that's going to lock this knot up. So just make a loop like that, and then I'm going to pull the tag end through that loop. We'll do one more. There's the trucker's hitch. Goes through the carabiner, through your quick release loop, back through the carabiner, around, loop it, half hitches, and you're good. That's nice and tight. I've got both my anchor points there, got both my anchor points down there, and I've got my 2 lines strung up. And my hammock line, and this is intentional, is just below the tarp line, so that when I set my tarp up, which is the next step, this line is not going to be in the way. I want my tarp to rest on this top line, not on this hammock line. And there's the 2 trucker's hitches. You can see there. 2 carabiners, 2 anchor points. Now what I'm going to do is throw the tarp over and string it out. Before I actually get into setting up the tarp, I just want to show some of the new features I added to it. Again, these are from Shug. These are his ideas, and last couple times I've been using these, they're very, very nice. The modifications I've made to the original HammocK-tarp shelter are that I added these loops in at the peak, which allows me to tie to the tarp line. I'll show you that in a little bit. And then I added 5 or 6 feet of paracord to each corner. First thing I'm going to do is secure these 2 loops to my tarp line. So what I have here is another loop with an S-beaner attached to it. And I'm going to tie what's called a prusik knot. All I'm going to do to tie this knot is make a loop over, then I'm going to run it through itself, and I'm going to do that several more times. Here we have the dressed prusik knot. As you can see, it's just 4 loops through itself. It's a very simple knot, but it does a great job for its purpose. So let me show you real quick. I can slide this knot freely wherever I want, but as soon as I put tension on it, there's no way it's moving. So what this allows me to do is hook up to my tarp like so, and then I pull my tarp and it stays nice and tight. So once again, there's my loop on the peak. Here's my loop with an S-beaner. Just gonna go ahead and make the knot. And the only thing I don't like about this knot is that it can get kind of messy if you don't keep your loops nice and organized. If they start overlapping and stuff, then you gotta fiddle with them for quite a bit. And there is another way to tie the prusik knot, but I've actually found, at least with this rope, that it doesn't hold under a significant amount of tension. And especially with the hammock, last time I used it I slipped. So this type of prusik is definitely better, at least in my opinion, for this. Okay, see, there you go, that's what I'm saying. It starts to get a little tricky. Okay, got our prusik, got our loop, boom. That tarp is nice and taut on that top rope. Those 2 prusiks are holding it. Come over here, see the other one, and what I can do is just loosen it, and then if I want to get some sun or something, I can move my tarp back and it's out of the way. I can lay in my hammock in the open. Then at night, or if weather comes in, boom, just move it back nice and tight once again. This is another trick I learned from Shug called porch mode, and what it does is raises one side of your tarp and lets you look out and have a nice view while you're laying or sitting in your hammock. Next, I'm going to show you how I set up the hammock inside my shelter here. We're going to use a similar method to the tarp. Here we have 1 dressed prusik knot, so we'll go ahead and do 1 more on the other end. There we have our second prusik loop. Now, all we got to do is take our hammock carabiner and pop it on just like that. So, same thing over here. Pop that through, and now we can adjust. Here's a view from inside the HammocK-tarp shelter. You can see my hardware over there. Got our hammock line here with the prusik knots. Prusik knot down there. And what's nice about using one main line is that it's right here accessible to me. So even when I'm laying down, I can hang my watch or my knife or whatever from here, and it's right in front of me wherever I want it. So definitely nice to have this main line with the paracord here. So, as I mentioned in the first tarp hammock video, normally you'd be in here sleeping with a mat and a sleeping bag, because if you didn't and it was cold, you'd be cold. So for the purposes of this video, I didn't bring any of that stuff, but definitely if it's going to be cold, I'd recommend having those things